Yeah, we're live in the morning, 9:15. Milo and I. How Milo? What are you doing? What are you doing? That's it. That's all you got. Just laying down. This morning, hopefully everyone's doing well. I don't have they finally released the. I need to see if I won the big lottery thing. I need to see if I won the Powerball, the 1.9 billion or 2 billion or whatever it is, whatever it came out to be. I need to see if I need to keep going to work. I would still do that, but it would be a lot of money. That would be fun. And then I think everybody's hopefully going out and voting. That's important. I got an interesting call from my wife. She said, "Hey, your mom is worried um, about going and voting. You know, knuckleheads. You know, voter intimidation, knuckleheads, or whatever." I'm like, "Oh, I will definitely take her." I would hope somebody would come up and say something. That's just silliness. But I don't think I thought that they were having trouble with the Powerball thing. I thought for some reason there was some kind of issue or deal where they didn't release the numbers or something. I thought that I was looking at numbers yesterday and I checked all my stuff and I was like, oh well, we only hit 2 numbers on one of them because I basically got Powerball deals for everybody in my family. Even Milo got one. We put his name on one so he could have steak and pizza and beef jerky just live the high life for the rest of his life. But I thought that I went through them because I thought that they listed them, but the problem is there's that all the time, and so I was probably looking at the wrong one. So I don't know if they put those up yet. I'm hoping that they did, that I could do all kinds of cool, the projects that I could do with that kind of stuff. I would be on the dyno all the time. That would be like total awesome sauce. Make sure this morning time, go get your projects done. It's starting to get cold, and the motivation for projects goes way out because you can't, I want to paint stuff and I don't want to paint when it's cold because it doesn't work as well. I need to get one of those big jet heaters to heat up the block so I can, and I know when I brought this stuff home, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna bring it back from West Tech. And so I can get it painted and get it assembled and at least have the short block all done. And because I normally do the assembly stuff there. And I'm like, well, I'm here. I could get it done. I could do some videos on it. It'll be cool stuff. And then I got the heads painted and then didn't get the block painted at the same time or the pan. And now it's getting cold. And I don't know if it's going to warm back up between now and whenever I would have to be, when it would be summertime again. So I don't know if it's going to get painted or not. It needs to, though. I don't like leaving it bare because it's all been machined and stuff. And I want to get it together and get oil, at least on all the bearing surfaces and stuff. And I've reached out to a few different people. So if anybody is out there watching the video or anybody knows of anybody, I'm looking for an original solid flat tappet L78, 375 horse, 396. Same one in a 425 horse, 427. Or the LS6 Chevelle camshaft, same camshaft. So I'm looking, I have lifters, but I'm looking for the camshaft. I would like to run an original Chevrolet version. Comp has or offers a version of that's a, kind of a reproduction, but I don't think it's exactly the same. I think it's actually a little bit better than the factory one. So I would like to use a factory one if that's possible. If anybody has one of those, I have to imagine that they're out laying around, that people would have those, that they're usually things that people took out and upgraded because as decent of a cam as it was back in the day, it's not great. There are lots better choices for a guy putting a big block together. The only reason that you would do this and put that particular camshaft in something, if you're doing something the way that I'm doing it, others when you're doing a reproduction of something or an original, if you're putting together an original one that's a numbers matching with all of the right crankshaft and rods and pistons and all that stuff, then you might be wanting to do that. But otherwise, and I would think that those people doing that would be fewer than the people that would be putting a big block together and then upgrade it. Because even if you had a 396 like this, you would, I would put some Airflow Research 265 heads on it or something, and put a different camshaft in it, definitely than that solid flat tappet cam, because there are much better choices. I probably wouldn't use a solid flat tappet anyway. I would use, depending on what I was looking for, if it was a milder combination, I'd use a hydraulic flat tap it. And then if it's something that I really wanted to make power with, I would go with some kind of roller, either a hydraulic roller, depending on where we wanted to run it to, because the 396 likes to rev, or a solid roller if you're really wanting to make power. I don't know. I don't know on the 396. I don't know how much cylinder head it could take advantage of, but we would have to see. I mean, it's basically small block small block size. But I would think something like a 265 airflow head, that's a fairly small port and has a lot of flow and has a lot of power potential. So I think that could take advantage of it. This thing has notches on it because it does use the big valve head, the 219 heads on it. So it has notches on it for the big valve because they use that chamber size and that valve spacing for the bigger bore stuff for the 427 and for the 454. So I'm excited about getting that done and getting it tested, but I'm really most excited about getting down and getting the Dodge stuff going. I want to get I'm anxious now to put together a motor and run it. I want to build something. I need to get something going, and I want to get it together and hear it start up and run. And I love getting to the point where I have the thing running and I can start testing. Going through all of the stuff, building is okay, but going through all of the stuff to get it ready and curing all of the multitude of problems that happen before it's in that position. Like I like when the motor is together and works and is complete. Lots of my motors are not complete. They're in various stages of disarray. But if it's all together and running and I can just put it on and make it work, and then I do actual testing. Okay, now I have this running. I could do a camshaft. I could do an intake manifold. I can do cylinder heads. That's where I want to get the Dodge to. I want to get the Dodge to it's running. I want to run a bunch of even before we put the turbo stuff on, I want to run a bunch of NA stuff because that will be ultra critical for me to determine what the gain was before we put the turbo stuff on. Because you want to make sure that you're not altering the results or skewing the results because your boost changed or something. So if I put a long tube header on, like I want to run all the intake manifolds, I want to run a cylinder head comparison. We want to run the swirl head versus the bathtub head or the G head, and I want to see what those do. I think ultimately with something like this, the intake manifold is definitely going to show. We're definitely going to show something because that's less about flow than it is about runner length. And so I want to see what the change is in the power curve. I suspect that we're going to see gains everywhere. I don't think that the log style manifold in the RPM range that would be running this motor in is ever going to be as good as the other two. Cylinder head could be a different thing, especially if we look at flow rate. If we look at the flow rate of the stock head, and then also if we limit it with a small stockish kind of camshaft, you're just never really going to be taking advantage of what the head would have to offer. So if we have a ported head, if we're to do a proper ported head comparison, you need enough motor. A better test for the cylinder head for what a ported cylinder head has to offer, if we were going to do it NA, would be a 2.5 with compression and a good intake manifold and a big enough throttle body and a header. And then on a turbo thing, it would be, really pushing the power envelope on a turbo combination to get the head flow, because you can make a bad head with boost. You can make a bad head artificially better. So you have to push things past that point where, okay, now even under boost, it's kind of becoming restrictive. If the cylinder head makes more power NA, then we start multiplying that and all that stuff. So there's a lot of things to consider when we're doing this kind of testing. I'm just excited about getting going and running various things because we want to see. I love seeing that it did this at 7 pounds and then 9 pounds and 10 and all the way up to 20 or whatever. And then the intercooler does this, and the camshafts particularly are the intake manifolds I'm excited about. And then like what boost does, I kind of have a pretty good feel for that. But I'm really interested in the intake manifolds. I'm really interested in what camshafts will do on these. And then after that, the ported cylinder head thing, which would be very, very cool. So let's see what you guys did. Did anybody win the lottery here? Richard, just do this full time. This is what I do full time. This is my job. How long can you run boosted ring gap before you actually get the boost adders bolted on? You can add ring gap to any motor, whether it's boosted or not, and you can run it indefinitely. Mopars, Mustangs, and minivans. Did you get to run in that race that you were wanting to run in? Did you get enough subs and stuff for that? Preston, so the new numbers are out? Okay, cool. I'll have to check it out. A retrofit Hydro Boost. I've never done a retrofit. I have had Hydro Boost on vehicles before, though. Blue Collar, you're in Florida trying to reason trying to reason with hurricane season. At least it rhymes, which is awesome. We did go to the Bahamas during hurricane season. We were at the Royal Atlantis, and when Hurricane Irene came through. Lunchtime. That's right. It is lunchtime on the East Coast, Tom. Lunch break motivation. That works too. 45 on my 240,000 rings. Slapped it back together, send it. 45 seems like a lot. It's not something I wouldn't run, but that is quite a bit. That's more than you would need for any kind of boosted application. I don't think you could get those rings to touch. So let's see. I can take a look at those. I thought that those were so 10, 33, 41, 47, 56, and then 10. What was that, Milo? What happened, huh? Something tried to jump out and scare you? You're okay, huh? You're okay. Hit the thumbs up. About to purchase my first junkyard small block Chevy to rebuild for boosts and Pumpy 85. Anything to look for? Which small block are you going to start with? Because there's obviously lots of different factory small block versions. The one that I normally recommend when guys doing a small block is the L31, the Vortec headed one. If you're not going to upgrade the heads later on, that's probably the best head to start out with. It has the most power potential. You just have to do a little bit to the spring area to get to run decent cams in them. Picked up an 88 Ram D50. Very cool. Have a 318 laying around. Nice. I heard from Andy that your head is on David Vizard's to-do list. Cool. What I need to get now is I need to somehow get a hold of Turbo Monza and get my 3800 heads back. It's time to get that going. I don't know if he's not going to get them done. I just need to get those heads back. So if anybody's in touch with him, please let him know. I just need to get them sent back. I'll pay him whatever needs to be paid, and I got to get those heads back. David says we're all using the wrong cam because the right one isn't readily available. I'd like to know what David's definition of the right cam is. Did you find a set of 305 heads you were looking for? Thought you said they were 48s. I'm not looking for 305 heads. I was looking for Pontiac heads. 48s are the 350 Pontiac heads. And the guy that's doing the machining, the machine shop that's doing the machining on the Trophy 4-cylinder, which I got, my buddy Andy took the rods and pistons over for the Trophy 4-cylinder. So hopefully that can get back together. He's also, because he does lots of Pontiac stuff and he's got lots of Trophy 4-cylinder guys. But he also thinks he might have a set of 48 heads there. So if he does, and I know that there are others, but I've read that there's so much misinformation out there, or that there's information that contradicts each other, I think is probably a better phrase. I've looked up the specs on that. I want to build an HO 350 Pontiac, a version of that, and run it and see how well it does. But those heads, I'm told, are the 48s, the casting number specifically that they use on the HO 350. Big valve heads, like a 400 head, small chamber. I'm told that they're 66 to 68 cc's. And then I do the calculations, and the compression ratio on that motor doesn't come out to near what they're saying that it is. Every time I've tried it, it's much, much less. And everybody that I've talked to on these has said every time that they've looked at it or measured it, that it's not as high as they're saying that it is. Yeah, we put rods in the trophy 4-cylinder too. Richard, have you ever done a turbo LS with the stock cam with upgraded valve springs and ring gap and turned it up until it's done making power? No, I'm not interested in that, only because the power will be fairly low at very high boost levels. Because that motor only makes, like, if you have a 5.3 and you have a stock cam in it, it makes like 350 stock. And then so you're then multiplying that 350 number, so at 14.7, it's 900, and then 1,000 something at 2 bar or at 3 bar. It's just not something I'm interested in. That wouldn't be, and the reason for that is that you wouldn't ever do that. You wouldn't ever keep running the boost up with a stock cam. That would be nonsense. If you're going to try to make lots of power, you would definitely put a cam in it, and almost any kind of cam. But if you put a cam in it, you can easily get another anywhere from, you could get 100 horsepower with a cam swap NA. And so now that 100 horsepower is now 300 horsepower when you start adding boost to it. So it would be much smarter to do it that way. The only reason that people keep a stock cam in there is because they're not going to run very much boost and not run very much power. They want it to drive nice. They want to run 7, 8, 10 pounds or whatever and run around. And that works really well. If you're going to go beyond that, because even at 7 pounds or even 10 pounds, if you put a cam in it, you're going to be up 150 horsepower from where you are. So it just makes more sense to have any kind of camshaft in there. I've got ported 243, 241 heads for a part of an LS6 intake manifold. How did you get an 85 millimeter throttle body on an LS6 intake opening? Is there that much room before you get to the O-ring? 11.3 to 1 pack springs, 130 pound seat, which seems a little on the low side. Why do you have 3/8 push rods in that? You don't have anywhere near enough spring pressure to need a 3/8 push rod. 150,000 is preload on LS7 lifters. It seems like you're doing like race car stuff for what is basically a street motor. I've done a bone stock Trailblazer SS. It's leaking oil where the dipstick goes into the block. I don't lose a lot, and only really comes out a little bit when I get on it. I wouldn't worry about it. Look at the two things that happen on the dipstick is, one, the dipstick has a taper to it and it has an O-ring that sometimes gets bent, and sometimes it can even crack and leak oil there because it's on the upper edge of where the O-ring is, or the O-ring gets bad. And the thing is, you can go. A dipstick is one bolt. You can go unbolt it and go get another dipstick from the wrecking yard. I've always heard the head stuff for Wallace Racing wasn't without controversy. I don't know what you mean by that. The factory compression rating was given by Pontiac and not by Wallace Racing. I like the Wallace Racing compression calculators and all that stuff. I use that stuff all the time. Summit 8720 cam, 218, 227. Bottom end is a Gen 4. ARP big end bolts, 2.5 thousandths. Races are short, 4 to 6 laps. Why did you put ARP rod bolts in there? The 292 will be retested. Sean, that stuff will last for 7,500. Although the 218 cam, you're not going to be making power at 7,500. I'm going to be boosting the 8720 cam. Am I working on two different people here? No, that's right. No, that's Sean's. Okay. Preston. I'm trying to keep all these straight. Okay, the reason I ask is I have an S10 with one at 15 pounds. Stock truck still gets 25 miles per gallon to maintain economy. That's fine. I think you could put a smaller camshaft in there and still get good gains and not change the fuel mileage that much. If at all, at least the cruise fuel mileage. An S10 and 25 miles per gallon. That's pretty good. That seems like a lot. So your 258 is going to get a 220, 226. That's probably a good size cam. It's a circle track car. What's the target ring gap? Like 28 thousandths, 30 thousandths, anywhere in there is fine. Richard, I'm thinking about going to a one-wire HEI Chevy distributor for my farm truck. That's fine. Those are good. They work good. They have plenty of ignition power, especially for any kind of NA. Please test dimple porting. Eric already did that. At least he tested the airflow thing. I can tell you that nobody in any professional form of motorsports does that. Not Formula One, not Pro Stock, no NASCAR teams. Nobody does that. So it's probably not something it's definitely not something used at that level. Does anyone make a cam with the same specs as a Truck Norris for a small block Chevy? That's not what you'd want. The Truck Norris isn't the magic cam whose specs work for every motor. What cam and intake would you use for a 6.2 L92 and a 69 Camaro drag week build stick shift car? Well, what kind of power are you trying to make, and what RPM are you running, and what gearing and all of that stuff? Like what is the build that's going into this? An S10 with a 2.2 and a turbo and a T5. I would like it. I would really like a Rampage with the 2.2 turbo swap in it. I think that would be an awesome truck for me for what I have to do. That would be perfect. The thing that I worry about is the what is it? 50-year-old 50-year-old electronics and all that stuff. So I'm mill my head 60 thousandths. Will I need a different push rods? Yes, you definitely will. And you're also need to look at whether the intake is going to bolt on. 60 thousandths is a lot more than most people normally do. And you're also weakening the deck surface. If the motor didn't blow up, can you tell on the dyno or at a teardown that the ring gap was too little? You only see that if they touch. If they touch and you can get them to touch and not snag and not break, you would be able to see, you'll see scuffing in the walls. Otherwise, it won't show. Because if you still have 1,000ths clearance, that's enough. If you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 10, that's enough. If you still have clearance and they don't pinch together and stick in the cylinder wall and then snap the ringland, then you have enough. And until after that, then you don't. Does a vacuum leak cause overboost? No, unless the leak is going to your wastegate. It'd have to be in the line going to your wastegate. And then it wouldn't be a vacuum leak, it would be a boost leak. My uncle just picked up a beautiful 84 Rampage. I'm trying to talk him into a Turbo 2 swap. It would be good. That would be the ideal little truck. Haywood, the VS Racing Gen 1 7875 is probably a decent 800 to 900 horsepower turbo. Got the replacement engine in my Dodge Magnum in and running, but I forgot to attach the PCV and the EGR to the intake manifold, so I had a huge vacuum leak. Yeah, that's not good. It's not going to idle very well. I did 28 and 30 on a 3.88 bore and have enormous blow-by. I haven't ever seen that. I've run more than 30,000ths on 4.8s and 5.3s and don't have blow-by. Yeah, Turbo Rampage would be awesome. Stock Cam 5.3 S10 has 342 gears, 7875 Gen 1 Mustang dyno 530 rear wheel, 15 degree. It made that much power at only 15 degrees of timing. What boost level is that at? Oh, that's got to be 15 pounds, probably, right? Highway fuel mileage stayed the same. Well, your fuel mileage would be cruising. Your fuel mileage, even with the turbo, should be what it is NA. But your combined stuff driving around town, your fuel mileage is strictly going to be a function of the way that you drive. A turbo VW truck, those would also be good. Like a turbo diesel truck would be good. A turbo diesel VW. Richard, how soon do you need to retune after a cam upgrade? Immediately after a cam upgrade. Otherwise, it's not going to run right. Sean, I don't think 130 pounds of seat. We run more than 130 pounds of seat pressure. And a 3/8 push rod is definitely going to be heavier than a 5/16 push rod. I don't run 105 wall stuff because it didn't show any power change compared to an 80 wall 5/16. Turbo Safari Rampage. The other one is what is the What's the Plymouth version? The Scamp. I think that the Car Farm guys had a Scamp there too. Yeah, the TDI stuff is really good for fuel mileage, and having a little truck with a TDI on it would be awesome. Have you tested Dave Vizard's 128 camshaft formula? You don't need to test it. We already know what it does. Dave Vizard's formula might work. It only works for his definition of what a cam is. It's not an absolute thing. Doesn't take into account drivability or what converter you'd use. It doesn't take any of that stuff into account. All of the things that people actually take into account when you're choosing a camshaft. All he's looking at is power production. And again, I don't think that I don't think that, as much as I love David and think that he's a sharp guy, that formula is not going to give you the best camshaft. There's no single formula that can do that. All he's doing is tightening up the LSA, which we know what that does. It does work. How long should a set of plugs last on a 2015 Vet? I don't know, 100,000 miles. Richard, do a diesel on the dyno. We won't run diesels on the engine dyno. They have run them on the chassis dyno, although they don't do diesel stuff really on the chassis dyno even anymore. Turbo V6, you want to see a GM 2.8 or the 3100 or the 3400. That's the definition of best is extremely subjective. That's exactly my point. Is that, and I tell people that all the time. Well, what cam should I use? Well, I can't really tell you that. I can't tell you what you define as a successful cam choice because that's purely subjective. I can give you the horsepower thing, but I recognize that that's not the one that I show you is not the one that I'm recommending. That's why I show you lots of different ones. So that you can pick, oh, do I want a torque cam? Do I want a Truck Norris cam? Do I want a best cam? Or do I want a sloppy stage 2 cam? Because all of those do different things. And whether or not you like, and the power curve is just one thing, but whether or not you can start by that, oh, look, I want this kind of power. I want this power curve. This is the thing that I care about. Obviously, I would want the low speed power of the most torquey cam down low and the highest power of the highest power one up top, but you can't have that. So you got to pick. You got to choose what sort of thing you're willing to trade. And then you have to look at all the other things. Do I want to change my converter? Do I care about idle quality? Do I have a stick or an automatic? What kind of fuel mileage is this going to return when I'm just driving under cruise? Do I need to change injectors? The answer to that is normally yes. But all of those things are very important and much more than a simple formula is ever going to tell you. If Richard were a chef, people would go up to him and ask him what they want for dinner. That's exactly right. That's perfect. I think that's the best I've ever heard it said. Whoever is the Richard Holder of transmissions needs the wrong converter shirt. I'm sure that those guys get that too. And then you'd get the people that say, oh, well, yeah, you can't have any overlap on because I had somebody argue with me about that the other night. Can't have any overlap on a turbo cam. I'm like, yeah, you can. It works really, really well. Overlap and boost are not mutually exclusive. Stock Trailblazer SS. I'm right over here by the guys at the Faster Proms. He's so busy sometimes. What mod's can I do without needing a tune? You should be asking yourself this: if the modification that I do doesn't need a tune, how much power am I really getting? You can do some things, probably headers you might be able to do, but I'd still want to monitor the air fuel, and I'd still want to test it on the chassis dyno to see what it's doing. Because even headers are going to change if it changes the power, is it necessarily going to change the timing that it wants? Is it necessarily going to change the air fuel that it wants, that it needs added to make that more power? I don't know if it does do that. I know that we all don't want to pay for a tune, but the tune is a critical part of you getting the power. That's why when I do the testing, I always start with whatever the baseline is. If it's a stock motor, it comes with a tune. It's tuned so that it's optimized power production the way that it is, the way that it sits with these current like combination of parts. This is our starting point. Then when we put a camshaft in it, here's what you can get. But both of those situations require it to be right to begin with. If I just put it on there and threw in whatever tune, we wouldn't have any idea what it's capable of because the tune part of it might be holding it back. What if it only has 14 degrees of timing instead of 29 like it wants? And I've showed you in the videos what happens when we do that when it's not correct. You plan on using the factory stock style piston? Yes, we have I have a stock set of pistons there, but they're 30 over, I think, which is all that I could do with the block that I had. And then we have stock rods also for the L78. And Caleb, we're also using the pistons have the junky 564s Hastings rings in them too. It's a stock stuff. It's not ideal and not the way that I would build it if I were building it, but it is what this was originally. Are there any flow differences from cylinder to cylinder on the stock LS head? Yes, they're not going to be exactly the same, but they're not too far off though. You want a cam that makes maximum torque at 3,000 and peak horsepower 7,500? Let me know when you find that. So, John, you're thinking the Mitsubishi V6 3.5 liter is the only way to go? It's like it's the best engine ever. How much power would it take to damage the dyno? I don't know. I think that the dyno is capable of 2,000 horsepower, but I think it's also a function of RPM and torque. I think trying to have it load too much torque down low would affect its ability, would affect the absorber's ability. That's why on the dyno, the goal is not to try to break the dyno because it's very expensive. So you use it as a tool, and you use it as a tool that you want to keep using over and over again. Do I need an injector upgrade on a 5.3 LS with a truck Norris? Yes, more than likely. That camshaft is going to add enough power where I think you're going to be taxing the limit of the stock injector, if I remember right. I can't remember is it a 25-pound injector? Yeah, because if it's a 25-pound injector, you're only looking at around 400 horsepower, and this is going to make more than that, or more fuel pressure. Ideally, though, zero overlap would make and utilize more boost and make more power. No, that's 100% not accurate. The boost doesn't leak out the exhaust. That's not what happens. If the camshaft makes more power NA, it will make more power at every given boost level. You push out a quart of oil every 100 miles, you need to fix the leak. Yeah, Tony, the idle clips for camshafts, that's a real thing. Apparently, I didn't really understand it, but people like that. I mean, Jonathan, you can buy books. If there's an AutoZone book about how to rebuild a 5.3, it will give you a lot of information and tell you step by step. That's a good start. The L78 was rated at 425 in the 65 Corvette before it was replaced by the 427, but it's the same motor. Are iron heads more reliable than what? How much RPM lift can a stock Ellis hydraulic roller lifter handle? There are guys running 8,500 with hydraulic roller stuff, but not a stock one. They're usually using short travel lifters to do that. But we've gone 7,500 with stock hydraulic roller lifters. How wide is the RPM range on a cam? I want 1,000 to. Well, your camshaft will make some kind of power or do something at 1,000 RPM, and it will also do that 7,000 RPM, but it won't be optimum at all in all that RPM range. What would be good injectors? Anything that would be 30 pounds or above would be good. Times 16. Yeah, 30 pounds, 36 pounds, 42 pounds, 46 pounds, anything above probably the 30-pound range on a 5.3 would be fine. Are you to test a custom grind camshaft on the Dodge 2.5? Yes. And I'm testing the factory NA cams and then the factory turbo cams and then slider cams and roller cams. Any tips on how to clearance a windage tray? On how much clearance? It just needs 20 or 30 thousandths is probably more than enough. 42 pounders is fine. You can we run on the 4.8 and on the 5.3 we won't run 80 pounders in it, even NA, so it's fine. As long as you can have the ability to tune it, you can take the fuel away. That's not a problem. And RPM will affect it also. Sean, why are you only running an LS6 injector at 50 psi? Why wouldn't you be running it at 58 PSI like it was designed to be. Sean, what was your combination? I'm trying to scroll back and see what your combination was. And I'm scrolling. You're the one that had the 3/8 push rods, right? And I'm looking. I wanted to see what cam you were talking about. Sean, so you have a 218, 227 cam? Yeah, that's not going to be making 500 horsepower. Somebody wants me to run a Jetta VR6. I'm trying to get back. I'm trying to get back. I'm still scrolling. What car do I drive? My daily driver is a LS truck. It's a 02 Silverado. How much did the L31 Vortec pick up with headers and a carb intake? I think you can look on the videos. I honestly don't know if I've run a stock one of those because we normally run them with an intake and headers on it. But headers are usually at least 10 to 12, sometimes 15 compared to stock exhaust manifolds. And they pick up power everywhere because the tuning effect of the long primary lengths. With 65-pound injectors, 65 times 16 times 0.85. Yes, they would do 600. Is 330 horsepower a safe bet on L31? 300. It won't make 330 horsepower with a stock camshaft and an intake manifold and headers on it. The ones that we run, if I remember right, from the wrecking yard, are closer to 300. Uh, 8V. I don't know what you're talking about there, so I probably have not seen whatever you're asking about. Will taking the jets out of my carburetors let more fuel flow? Depends on what the flow or if the size of your metering block is. Chris, I'm not part of Motor Trend, so I don't have access to any of that stuff. Uh, 8V. Somebody made 1,500 horsepower with a B series. That seems like a lot. I'm struggling with math on runner length. Yeah, that's that's very, very difficult. What is it you're trying to find out? Since I've run lots of different runner lengths on things and actually tested them on the dyno, which is going to be better than a calculator anyway. The calculators at best are going to tell you a single cylinder thing, and it has no overlap feature for the other things that are happening. LM7 stage 2 80-pound injectors, long tubes, LS1 intake coupled with a Turbo 400 and a Terminator X. The LS1 intake manifold is the worst one. You'd be much better off running the truck intake manifold that will make more power, or a Trailblazer SS, or a Fast, or a what are they? The Dorman LS2. But the thing is, if you put a turbo on it, you can always make 700 horsepower. That's pretty easy. Like, see, to test some home ported LS heads versus ASCAS. We know that there is good power to be had from porting. So we know that a well done set of ported heads flows 60 or 70 CFM better than stock heads do. So we know that that's possible. We put bigger valves in it, unshroud the chamber, do real porting like a stage 2 set of total engineer flow heads or whatever. You know that you can get the stock heads to flow over 300 CFM. So we know that that's possible. That's the extreme end. And then there's the cast version. Home ported heads will be in between those two somewhere. Depending on how good the home porter is, will vary on how much, on where you're going to be, like which end of that spectrum you're skewed to. If it's a really good guy, if you have Brian Tooley doing your home porting heads, he's going to probably get closer to the all out things. If you have me doing it, I'm going to be closer to the stock thing. I know that I can get 20 or 30 maybe CFM from just minor porting. So how much effort are you putting into it? Who's doing it? All of that stuff is going to be much more important than some generic home porting thing. So there won't be an absolute number there. It'll depend on more how much work they put into it and how good they are. Is a 650 Edelbrock on a 5.3 with 450 horsepower enough carburetor? Yes. Putting ring gap on my boosted LS2 is a lot of work for me, so I'm going to gamble it and just run 10 pounds. Is the motor already in the car? And here's the thing I don't understand. How do people choose a boost level and no ring gap? Why did you decide you need 10 pounds? What if you're going to make a lot of power on 7 pounds? So it's for a 2.4 SRT4 Neon, trying to keep the mid torque, but push the RPMs up to 8,500 to 9,000. Uh, 650 isn't overkill for a 450 horsepower 5.3. That's actually the perfect size for a 450 horsepower 5.3. Richard, what is a conservative power goal for a reed gap LQ4, TSP stage 2 turbo cam, dual valve springs, and a T6 80mm turbo on pump gas? I don't know about the pump gas part. I don't know how far you want to push the detonation threshold of that, but you certainly could make like probably 700 at the or so. Is VVT on the L92 mechanical or electronic? It's both. It's controlled with electronics, but the actuator is mechanical. will an engine get better fuel mileage at higher altitude? I don't think that it does. Even though you have to have more throttle angle to drive around normally, I don't think that it gets better fuel mileage. Currently rating 6 psi, but doing research and people say their stock bottom end blows at 15. John, I don't remember what engine you were talking about. What is your motor combination? Oh, an LS2. A stock bottom end doesn't blow up 15 pounds. We ran 29 pounds on stock bottom end stuff. So let's see. So you're hoping to get 500 wheel horsepower from a 5.7? There's enough head flow to do that, but a stock bottom end is not going to allow you enough camshaft to do that. Richard, how much natural ring gap does a stock 4853 have at 200,000 miles? It varies. I've taken apart lots of different motors with different mileage on them, and the ring gap does not correlate to mileage. There's variances in the stock ring gap, and we've seen it down in the teens, in the low teens, and we've seen it up into the high teens, but I've never seen anything have the gap that it needs to run unopened. Like I've never seen anything that's like 26 or 28. What is the most idle timing? I don't do tuning for street stuff. So I don't go through idle timing. All I have to do on the engine dyno is just make the thing idle. So I don't even really play with idle timing ever. It can have 10 degrees or 20 degrees or 30 degrees. I don't even care. It doesn't matter to me. As long as the thing returns back and will stay at anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 RPM so that the engine doesn't die, so that I can transition back into wide open throttle stuff. I'm not tuning it on the dyno to do that. Bill, I've never seen anything that has 30 thousandths ring gap on it. And I've taken apart dozens and dozens of these LS motors. I've never taken apart anything that somebody else didn't already take apart at some time in its life. I've never seen anything have anywhere near ring gap like that. LS2 stock bottom end, how far can I push nitrous without adding gap? I'm assuming the limit is 100. We've run 150 shots with stuff like that. When you got the rings, you do the first and second ring, just not the oil ring. Yep, just not the oil ring. When you test the spark plug gap, did the engine idle smoother with a larger gap? I don't know. I didn't ever dial in the idle because that wasn't a concern. I was only looking for power. Richard, how many miles do you think you can get out of an engine with an open ring gap? I don't think that the ring gap is going to affect the It's not going to affect the ring wear, which is the thing that what you would want to replace when you get a high mileage motor normally. You're going to have other things that go bad before that happens. Tim, you're wanting, it depends on the bore size, but 6.5 to 7 thousandths per inch of bore. Jack, I've never done that exact test that you're talking about. A 243 head is a better head. It has more compression because of the chamber size. And even if you were to mill the 317s down, the chamber design of the 243 head is still better. So it's going to make more power. If it's an NA motor, I don't think it's going to be a lot because it's ultimately going to be kind of more about flow. But Brian told me that he did a test on that, but they did it on a motor that was making a fair amount of power. I'd have to ask him again how much it was. It's not going to be a lot. If you're looking at stock-headed things anyway, you're talking about not a lot of power. Bill, you're wanting to not put ring gap in it, and you're wanting to change back pressure by having a less responsive turbo and less back pressure is what you're trying to do. I've never tested gaps beyond about 34 or 5 thousandths. I think is probably the biggest gap that I've run and stuff. Dirty fabrication. A 239, 244 with a 112 plus 3 will fit with a stock piston to valve clearance. There's no need to try gapless rings for boost. Casey, I don't think you're going to see very much change in cranking compression from a ring gap change. A leak down might be a better test for that. The dynamic equation that happens when you do a cranking compression test, that stuff, even at fairly slow cranking speeds, which would be 250 RPM or so, with no other plugs in there, that stuff gets trapped pretty fast and doesn't have time to leak out, and which is exactly what's happening while the motor's running. It doesn't have a lot of time for the stuff to go, oh, I'm going to go down past this one and then over here around this one and then down past this one. It's happening so fast that it's hard for that to happen. Dirty fabrication. I know it's a max effort cam, but will it fit stock piston to valve clearance? It looks like it's way too big for the available piston to valve clearance. Have people run that with a stock piston to valve clearance? A more interesting test, because people were asking about, and then I've got to go. We didn't even have a poll here today. They're asking about doing a cranking compression test before and after you do ring gap. The more interesting test, I think, would be to do a cranking compression test and or a leak down test before you run it with boost, and then after you run it with boost. Like after we, I always run the motor NA. So we would run the motor NA after we put ring gap in it. It would be cool to see what the power change is with the ring gap. It's according to my other stuff that we've done on the Big Bang motors, it didn't really change power at all. I wasn't looking for 1 or 2 horsepower when we did it. We just put it back on there and it ran. It was like, oh, it's still doing what it's supposed to do. Because we're trying, it's a motor we're trying to break anyway, so we weren't too concerned with 1 or 2 horsepower. But it'd be interesting to do the test and see what it does, and then run it under boost and then see what it does again. And I've done that a few times where after we've run it with a turbo, we rerun it NA just to make sure that all of the abuse that we were giving it when we ran the turbo, that it's not now making less power NA, that we haven't worn out the rings or the other things that people would be worried about. What we see and this is more so, we notice it when we run nitrous on it, the rings seem to seal better after we run a couple of shots of nitrous on it. And I think we might see something similar with the turbo, but I would be interested in checking that out. Mark, so your guys are putting the caravan together. Is it what motor combination is in that? Oh, that's sad, Mark. Have a good show. And on that note, it's time to go. You guys go get your projects done. This is our morning show. Milo, don't wake up or anything. Don't show any enthusiasm whatsoever. Thank you guys all for showing up. I've got a video I'm working on. It's all about rectangle port heads, because you know you can't use those with turbos. Actually, we're going to show that you can. They work very, very well. But we have to show that so that it will answer questions for people. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tonight. Look, Milo, another success.